Bonjour. If you're in my blue cohort, you can skip ahead in the video. I did not get to teach the first topic to my gold cohort. So gold cohort, sit tight. You're going to do 3 of them. First topic is les adjectifs qui changent de sens, adjectives that change meaning, and it's based on their placement. You should know that adjectives in French almost always go after the noun that they describe. And not to plug French, but the way that French people describe things is actually very, very logical. So when they say the lamp shining and the dog red, it's logical from a psychological standpoint because you pull up the concept. In psychology, it's called a schema. Pull up the concept first and then modify it, rather than in English where I could say, oh, I saw this big, green, ugly, like, what am I going to say? Cloud? You're pulling up these abstract concepts and then slamming them together. So that's one way you can remember that the adjective comes after, because it's so logical. However, there are some adjectives that go before and always before, and you learned these too. D'accord? So a little bit of review. I've got the rhyme over here. They are au petit, grand, gros, premier, joli, beau, au trop long, mauvais, bon, jeune, vieux, nouveau. So those adjectives always come before. D'accord? And it has to do, like, why? It has to do with they're seen as like an innate part of, I don't really know. But those adjectives, if you memorize that they go before the noun, you get used to it. D'accord? Now, there are some adjectives that can go either way. And you actually learned them last year. And I believe Ms. Steckel taught you that if it goes after, if it's used after the noun as a descriptive word, it's concrete, something that's more concrete. So look at the word ancien. I might say c'est un château ancien. It's an ancient castle. Or let's look at another one. C'est une salle propre. It's a clean room. Those are concrete descriptions. D'accord? C'est une personne pauvre. That's a poor person, as in not having money. That's the direct description of the word pauvre. Or seul, je suis une personne seule. I'm a person lonely. D'accord? Sale as well. C'était une réponse sale. No, c'est une. I can't think of something to describe as dirty. C'est un chat sale. It's a dirty cat. D'accord? Meaning it's a cat that has dirt on it. Vrai as well. Ah oui, c'est une chose vraie. That's a true thing. D'accord? C'est une histoire vraie. That's a true story. And then cher. C'est un portable cher. That's an expensive phone. Now, if you use it before, they're not quite so concrete. They're more figurative. But not, I don't know, figurative is the word I want. C'est mon ancien prof. That's my former teacher. Okay. You're not calling him ancient, and certainly don't call him your prof ancien unless he is super, super old. D'accord? Another example, c'est ma propre voiture. That's my own car. Oh, quel pauvre enfant. What a poor child, as in what an unfortunate child. C'était une sale bêtise. That was a dirty or a nasty trick, maybe something like that. C'est la seule chose. That's the only thing. C'est une vraie. So there's a tricky one in here. C'est une vraie histoire. That's a real story. C'est un vrai garçon. That's a real boy. And then, c'est un cher ami. That's a dear friend. Now, the one that's a little bit harder to figure out is dernier. Dernier meaning last or previous. So Ms. Steckel you may recall, if you use dernier after, it means previous. Okay? And if you use it before, it means last. So le mois dernier refers to last month, as in the previous month, the month that we just went by. Whereas c'est la dernière fois is the last time, for example, that I'm going to tell you. C'est le dernier livre dans la série. It's the last book in the series. And I think that's how Miss Steckel may have taught you it, is that if it's used before, it's the last in a series, and if it's used after, it's previous. Cool. So let's do an example together. They have a model, but it says regarde cette maison, and you want to use the word blanche. That was very nice of them to make the adjective agree for you. White doesn't change meaning, so that's interesting that they chose white. But regarde cette maison blanche. Look at this white house. Okay, let's do number one then, an adjective that does change meaning. Grand. Now, grand is kind of a hard one to understand. If you use grand before a person, it means great. And if you use it after a person, it means tall. Cool. But it's different with an inanimate object. So if we want to say, Victor Hugo was a great author, we're going to put it before. Otherwise, we're saying, if we say un auteur grand, that means he's a tall author. So Victor Hugo était un grand auteur. D'accord? So grand is a little bit hard. I'll tell you this, if you use grand always before, a French person is not going to flinch. They'll understand if he's tall. D'accord? Okay, so you can go through and do those, and we'll check them in class. Activité 13, you're writing the whole noun phrase. So a noun phrase includes nouns and adjectives. You're just basically finishing the sentence. So number one, it says, tu as mon livre? Do you have my book? No, I have my own book. Not I have my clean book, but I have my own book. So propre, that means is the figurative meaning. It's going to go before. J'ai mon propre livre. Okay, that's not the whole noun phrase because the mon is part of the noun phrase, but I digress. So you're writing the rest of the noun phrase. My apologies. Okay. Second grammar point is double object pronouns. Now, this is sort of a tricky thing, and we'll go over it in class. In fact, in class, I'll probably be giving you much more practice. You've learned object pronouns, direct object pronouns, and your direct object pronouns are me, tu, le, la, nous, vous, les. D'accord? And that means me, you, him, her, or it, us, you, and them. D'accord? You've also learned indirect object pronouns, which is me, tu, lui, nous, vous, leur. D'accord? And that means to me, to you, to him, to them, to us, etc. And then you've learned e and en. Okay, as I'm looking at this, guys, we're gonna do this in class because this is gonna be some review. But why don't you do this for me at least? Don't actually write these sentences, but so that I can check them in class, write what you'd replace these things with if you can remember. So I'm going to remind you, E is for typically adverbial expressions that begin with the word at or to. So if you see a in front of an adverbial expression, E will replace it. Now that's not to be confused with your indirect object pronouns, which mean to and then a person. It's more like to a place or to an activity, and it's not only to, it can also be words like in or on, any sort of place. Cool? Any place, or if you see for e. En replaces an adverbial expression with de. So if you have like besoin de quelque chose, you're going to replace it with en. So what I'd like you to do is go through and try, and this will help me understand where you're at in class. Try and just write down next to each underlined thing what you think you'd replace it with. So don't write a full sentence. Do not write a full sentence because we're not ready for that. But if you see, like in the model, tu rends ton devoir. Now, ton devoir means your task or your one piece of homework. You're turning in your one piece of homework to the teacher. I would say you turn it into to the teacher, so that's to him. So that's going to be lui. D'accord? So see how I'm trying to simplify this for you? Do not write a full sentence. So I've got le is a pronoun that refers to ton devoir. You turn it to him, lui. D'accord? But don't write a full sentence yet. Just try and do as many of these as you can, as many of these as you can figure out, and then we'll go over in class. Now, let's do number 1 together. Vous n'écrivez pas de carte postale à vos amis. You don't write any postcards to your friends. Now, I see de and a at the beginning of the sentences. So I know that de, if I see de, is you use en. So I don't know if you remember that with mestacle, but if you have de at the beginning of an expression, choose en. And en means something like any of something. It can also mean some of something. À vos amis, is that going to be the indirect object? Lui, leur, meute, nous, vous, or is it going to be e? Well, I see that it's at or to people, so I'm going to say that it's an indirect object, which means I have to choose between meute, lui, nous, vous, and leur. So write what you think. I'm going to type what I think. Leur. D'accord? So like I said, do what you can. Some of these will be tricky, but we'll see when we go over them in class. Okay, qu'est-ce qui and qu'est-ce que will be easier. You know already that qui means who, or well, it means who, and que means what. D'accord? And you can follow those with a question. So in the example here, qui aimes-tu? Who do you like? Who like you? And que voyez-vous? What see you? Now, what's the difference between them? Qui is usually a person, and que is usually an object. However, that's not always the case. Qui is often a subject as well. If you'd like to, you can also follow qui and que with esque. That's something you're used to because you often have said qu'est-ce que since the junior high, and then you don't use verb inversion. So you could say qu'est-ce que vous voyez? D'accord? Now, if you, this is where it gets tricky. If you're asking about the subject of the sentence, though, if you're asking about the subject of the sentence, so I'm asking who likes you. D'accord? I would say, qui est-ce qui t'aime? Who is it who likes you? The reason you're using qui is not because we're talking about a person when it's after esque, when it's after s, but it's because it's the subject of the sentence. So this is going back to relative pronouns, learning the difference between que, qui, and dont, for example. Que is used in front of a new subject, and qui is followed by a verb. D'accord? So if you look at these examples, qui est-ce que tu aimes? We're asking who because we're asking about a person, but then it's est-ce que because we're asking about the object of the verb. You like who? Qui est-ce que tu aimes? D'accord? Not only that, I could say this another way. We're asking who, so it's qui, but it's followed by a subject, tu, so it's que. As opposed to the next one, again, we're going to be asking about who because I see qui leading the sentence. Qui est-ce qui parle? Who is it who is speaking? Qui, because we're asking who. Qui, because there's no subject. Who's speaking is who we're asking about. Look at the next one. We're going to be asking about an object, d'accord? And it's the subject, I'm sorry, and it's the object of a sentence. So, we're asking about a non-human, and we're talking about the object of the sentence. So, qu'est-ce que tu veux? What is it that you want? Notice that I shouldn't have said who for the second key. I should have said that. Who is it that speaks? Because qui and que both mean that. And you learned that when you learned relative pronouns. Basically, you've got relative pronouns. That's all this is a review of relative pronouns, but specifically in questions. Last question. Qu'est-ce qui arrive? Who is it that arrives? Since it's followed directly by a verb, we use qui instead of que. D'accord? All right. All right, ignore that part. All right, so it says write a question for each response using qu'est-ce qui or qu'est-ce que. Okay, all right, we can do this. This is not that bad. So we're going to rewrite this sentence. Le chômage est en baisse cette année. Unemployment is down this year. Okay? We're going to ask what's down this year. Okay? So A, we're not asking about a person. So we're going to use que. Okay? Also, the next word after that underlined word is a verb. So we're going to use qui. Qu'est-ce qui est en baisse cette année? That's it. You're done. It's not that bad. All right. The next one. La patineuse canadienne a remporté la médaille d'or. The Canadian ice skater brought home the gold medal. Now, we're asking about an object, so you know it's going to start with que. Qu'est-ce, rather. However, are we talking about the subject of the sentence? Is it followed by a verb, the thing we're asking about? Or are we talking about the object, which comes after the verb? Well, the underlined part, the golden medal, comes after the verb. So if we want to say, what did the Canadian skater bring home? We're going to use which one, since it's the object of the verb. Or I could say it this way, which one, since it's followed by a subject. Followed by a subject, we use que. So, qu'est-ce que la patineuse canadienne remporte? A remporté, rather, in the past tense. I'm not going to change it, though. All right. Do what you can for these ones, and then we'll go over them in class and see how you did. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions.